Hi, I'm
Hi.
Anastasia from Ghost Space. Thank you for tuning in to RebelCon and donating to UNICEF. I am here with Joe Corroney, a prolific Star Wars artist who's done work on Star Wars Insider magazine, comics, trading cards, and much more. Hi, Joe. How are you doing today?
Hi, Anastasia. I'm good. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I guess we'll just get right to it then. So, first question. Can you describe your experience growing up with Star Wars? Did you grow up with it? And how did you first become a fan?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with it from the very beginning. I was there at Ground Zero when Star Wars hit, so I was at that right age. I was just barely 4 years old when Star Wars came out, and it was just called Star Wars. It wasn't called A New Hope yet. So it was very impactful on my youth. That was the first movie I remembered seeing in the theater, though it's possible my mom and dad took me to something before that, but it was just before my fourth birthday when it came out that May. But it was definitely the first movie I remember seeing in theater because it was so just the experience of seeing Darth Vader for the first time really scared me. I remember hiding behind the seats. I remember seeing the Jawas for the first time. I remember seeing Chewbacca for the first time. So um, Star Wars was a big deal um, when when I was a kid because I also had the comic book that summer, the Marvel comic book adaptation. So and I was just that was my first experience in the comic books too. So Star Wars not only inspired me to my imagination, and then I would get the Marvel comic books, and then I would start drawing Star Wars, and that's how I relived the experience of the movie. So it's a lot different from maybe a generation after mine. Kids had the VHSs pretty handily. I didn't get those until probably high school. Um, so the only way I could relive Star Wars as a little kid was through the comic books, and then the following year the action figures. So all of that stuff hit at the right age for me, where I was very impressionable as a 4 year old, and then Empire Strikes Back came out, and I just turned 7. So I grew up with the classic trilogy, and it really informed, I mean, not only my imagination, but my path as an artist. Because I would sit there and play with the action figures, but then I would draw them too. So, and then of course I would read the comics, and then I draw the characters from the comic book. So it just all kind of weirdly, or not weirdly, but maybe just, I don't know, prophetically coalesced into this, like, all these pop culture elements of Star Wars just kind of informed who I became, basically.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think for us Gen Xers, that was the way we experienced it with the comics and action figures and all that.
Hmm.
So for that generation. So what you said you were drawing like to recreate the Star Wars experience. When did you decide you wanted to become like a professional illustrator, and who are your biggest artistic influences?
Well, I knew in probably, I mean, I guess, I mean, I knew right away as a kid. It was probably, I mean, no, I don't, like, when you're a little kid and adults ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was always, oh, I want to be an artist. Like, I knew that, but I didn't know what kind of artist until probably I got into, like, well, probably junior high, maybe even before junior high. I knew I wanted to draw comics one day because I was so into comic books. Um, so um, with that, I ended up wanting to do. I think by the time I got to high school, I knew I for sure wanted to be a comic book artist, and then I knew that I wanted to draw Star Wars comics and Star Wars art, probably it was like late in high school or early in college, because I had discovered the well, it was two things. Dark Horse Comics, I think, had started putting out the Star Wars comics again in the early 90s. So they had started redoing their adaptation to Heir to the Empire and some other comics. So that inspired me to want to to pursue a career in comic book, specifically even Star Wars comics, but the also playing the West End Games role playing game for it's sort of like Dungeons and Dragons but Star Wars. It was like an RPG tabletop game. So they had that for Star Wars, and those books had a lot of like Star Wars illustrations in them. So I knew as in high school I was going to go to art college. I knew already, thinking ahead, like, well, when I graduate art college, I have to pursue a career in illustration if I'm going to be serious about this. So I discovered those books in college, or early college, late high school. And I was like, oh, well, I can start sending my artwork to these publishers that produce these Star Wars books. Star Wars back then wasn't what it is now. Like it kind of trailed off after Return of the Jedi, the mid 80s. And it didn't really get big again. Well, it didn't. It started to come back in the early 90s, but even then, it wasn't really until 1997 when the special editions had come out, the re-release of the classic trilogy, 2 years before Episode 1 had come out, that Star Wars had really blown up. So I was still really into Star Wars when the rest of the world really wasn't. Like it was kind of like people had forgotten about it. They're like, well, yeah, Star Wars is cool, but now you can't escape it and it's everywhere and I love it. But from that period after Return of the Jedi up until, really 1997, there wasn't a lot there was Star Wars content, and whatever there was, I was getting into it, but guys like me, like, there were few and far between. It was sort of like, I don't know, now it's just everywhere again. So it's kind of how it is now, how it used to be when the classic trilogy first came out. So, but I knew I wanted to be an illustrator for Star Wars books. So,
yeah. So what was the first job that you did? How did you come to first illustrate for Star Wars? And what was that project, that first one?
Well, that was actually, so the West End Games, the publisher I was telling you about, who do the Star Wars role-playing game in the 80s and the early 90s and mid 90s. So when I graduated art college in 1990, let's say it was 1995, well, technically 96, but I had sent out my portfolio, and this is pre-internet. I mean, the internet was still like fairly new at this point. So I had to send out actual physical samples in the mail to this publisher. And I thought, well, I looked at some of the artwork that West End Games was doing for their role-playing game books, these supplements and modules and stuff. And I thought, well, I can do that. Like, that artwork some of the artwork was really good and some of it was not so good. And I thought, well, maybe if I show them some of my samples of my Star Wars art, I can, hopefully maybe they'll publish me and I can actually freelance and do freelance artwork for these Star Wars books. Mm-hmm. So I sent them a submission of my portfolio samples and some of my Star Wars sketches and my own characters. And about 6 months later, they ended up calling me and said, hey, we got your samples, really like what we see. Are you interested in freelancing and doing some illustrations for these different Star Wars gaming books? And this would have been in 1990s, I want to say late 96. It was right after I graduated college that summer. So technically, I think I started working for them in early 97. And I did artwork for them for a couple of years on, oh God, maybe like 12 or 14 different books, Star Wars books for West End Games. And a lot of it was like black and white pen and ink illustrations. But then I started doing color work. I did some paintings for them. And a couple of the books didn't come out because West End Games had gone bankrupt and they had lost the Star Wars license. So a few of the projects never ever came out, but I think like 12 of the books I did came out. So that was my first work, like my first official work for Star Wars. It was right before the special edition had come out for that. I think it was in 1997. So
Do you remember what the first thing you drew for that was? Or
oh god, well, yeah. I mean, I remember my very first Star Wars sketch I did because I was so excited. It was just this alien creature. The book was called Wretched Hive of Scum and Villainy. It was a supplement book on well, it had like role-playing game module, like adventures in it, and it had a bunch of different characters, and I was illustrating all these different bounty hunters. And I remember this first alien, this like plant creature alien that I had to draw. And a lot of the stuff that I was doing back then was stuff that had never been seen in Star Wars before. And it ended up becoming some of the foundation for the expanded universe, which was pretty cool.
Like anything in particular, or?
I mean, just certain alien races, like certain visuals, like, so, I mean, back then when we were working on this stuff, we weren't thinking, I mean, we weren't looking so far ahead, like, wow, you know, this is going to be in a movie someday, or they're going to put this in a novel. We weren't thinking of that. It was just like, I would get an assignment to illustrate some new alien species. And then I would, you know, come up with their design, and I'd have to do this, you know, because I had a deadline of a couple weeks. So I would sit there and sketch and draw, turn it in, send it in. But then and then you would see these characters pop up later on because other authors and artists who were working for Lucas Licensing would be like, oh, we're going to take this alien from this old role-playing game module. We're going to put him in this story. We're going to put this species in a comic book. And I'd be like, oh, I actually designed like the look of that species, or, oh, I drew that spaceship and now it's showing up over here. So that was under the, now it's considered the Legends canon, you know, so it's not, you know, ever since Disney.
Whatever.
What's that?
I said Legends, Expanded Universe, whatever. It's the same thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just now like all that, yeah, all that stuff that I had a very small hand in, like, now it's been rebooted. Now some of it still can come back into play. Not all of it's erased. That's not really how, I mean, now the new canon kind of cherry picks certain things that they want to use and they kind of reestablish. So, but you know, just having a hand, like most of the majority of my career as a Star Wars artist prior to Disney buying Star Wars was really contributing to the expanded universe and drawing characters like Jaina Solo and some of my own Jedi characters that ended up in other source material. So that was just kind of cool to be able to like contribute little things here and there to the larger mythology.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little about some of those characters. Who are your favorite Star Wars characters, and are they the same favorite characters that you like to draw?
Yeah, actually, so because my love for Star Wars developed hand in hand with my love for illustration as a little kid, and reading the comics, and then, you know, tracing the comics and drawing from the comics, and then coming up with my own characters ever since I was a kid. So growing up with the movies and the comics and the novels and all that, like my favorite characters as a fan are also my favorite ones to draw and illustrate, like Darth Vader and Boba Fett. Because as a kid, Darth Vader, when I first saw him, he scared me to death. I was barely 4 years old, and I had never seen anything like that before.
Me too.
Yeah, so like Darth Vader, I didn't know it was a man. I thought it was like a demon or like a demonic robot. Like I didn't understand that there was a guy in there when I was a little kid. So I used to get nightmares from Darth Vader. But one of the way to kind of cope with that as a kid was, well, I played with the toys, but I would also draw the character, and it kind of was like sort of owning the fear of that character, I guess, by kind of like sort of researching him or bonding with him through my artwork as a kid. So I like drawing Darth Vader, and Boba Fett was cool because he was just so mysterious. So I think if you grew up with the classic trilogy, even though Boba Fett kind of goes out like a punk in Return of the Jedi, he was still, even after Return of the Jedi, he was still this mysterious character. Yeah, I mean, he was just so iconic. Like his costume was so unique. He had this reputation, but now kids today are like, well, what's the big deal with Boba Fett? Whatever. It's like, well, because the classic trilogy set him up as mysterious, but then the prequels sort of demystified Boba Fett and went into his backstory. So he's still a really cool character to me, but now that we know where he came from and we know his tragic backstory, he's just been demystified. So a lot of newer fans may not get the fascination with the character, but as a kid growing up with the character, it was just so, he was such a powerful character visually and mysteriously enigmatic, and that appealed to me, as a comic book reader and as a fan of superheroes and supervillains. So Darth Vader and Boba Fett are still my favorite characters as a fan, but also as a storyteller and as an illustrator to work with.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I mean, it talks to the power of what a single design can do to inspire the imagination, like with Boba Fett. And I think that's awesome, the way that you talk about, drawing Darth Vader to understand him more, to just see overcoming childhood fears and such. Because I know that he scared me a lot too.
Yeah.
That scene where he cuts off Luke's hand,
Right.
Right.
Yeah, he was a bad dude. I mean, if you're a little kid and you have a character who claims to be your dad and is trying to kill you and all your friends, it's like, whoa, it's like that's, I mean, I think today audiences are a little bit more, a little more numb to some of the, because we're so desensitized because we've seen everything's been done and said. So characters like Darth Vader or even Boba Fett might not be as powerful, but growing up with the Star Wars trilogy and seeing these dramatic characters for the first time and experiencing them, it was like a pretty big deal.
Right. Do you have a specific favorite project that you've worked on so far?
As far as Star Wars goes, man, there's so many. Like, I mean, I love just illustrating anything Star Wars. Like, I have illustrations that I've done for different things that are maybe more popular than others because of how powerful they might be or how cool they might look. But I love doing artwork for Star Wars Celebration. In 2005, they had Star Wars Celebration. This is going back 15 years now. Geez. They had Star Wars Celebration in Indianapolis. It was Star Wars Celebration 3. And I'm from Indianapolis. That's my hometown. So I kind of campaigned with Lucasfilm. And this is all pre-Disney. So and I still have friends at Luke. I have plenty of friends there still. But back then, some of my friends that had worked there, well, he's still Steve Sansweet still works on a basis with Lucasfilm still to this day. But so Steve was running fan relations, and I had talked to Steve. I was like, hey, they're having Celebration in Indianapolis this year. I'd love to do some special artwork for the event. Maybe I can do like the poster for the convention and stuff like that. And it wasn't a sure thing and then he was like, yeah, we're going to let you do all the artwork for the event. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's great. So that was kind of cool just because I got to go back to Indianapolis and see my family and all my friends there. And the big Star Wars convention was in my hometown. And I got to contribute to the event by doing the promotional artwork for the convention. So in that sense, I mean, the artwork was all Revenge of the Sith episode 3 because the movie was coming out that summer. So in that sense, that artwork is special to me just because of what the meaning of the event, and getting to work with my friends at Lucasfilm and getting to work with Steve Sansweet on the artwork. And it was just a lot of fun memories, I guess. It's not necessarily like my most favorite thing I ever did as far as Star Wars art goes, but doing the artwork for Celebration that year was just, it was special to me.
Cool. Yeah, you've been around to, I'm sure, a lot of the conventions. Are there any other favorite conventions that you've done? Places?
Oh yeah.
That you like the best, or?
Yeah. Definitely, like, my two favorite Comic Cons are San Diego Comic Con and New York Comic Con. For different reasons, but also for similar reasons. San Diego is fun because I get to go to California every summer when there isn't a pandemic, and I get to be surrounded by all my friends and all the fans out there, and it's the weather's usually really beautiful, and it's just fun to be in California and get to go to Disneyland and stuff like that. So Comic-Con it's work. It's a lot of work, actually, and I have to balance business with fun, but it's totally worth it. And I always have a great time there. And then New York Comic Con is really fun because it's a totally different vibe. Like San Diego's all outdoor. Well, not all outdoors, but like the convention kind of spills into the city of downtown San Diego, and it's sort of like it's like Mardi Gras, like all week. Like San Diego's it's like nerd Mardi Gras, basically. And when you leave Comic-Con that day, the convention just keeps going and going. New York is different because Manhattan is so huge. New York Comic-Con doesn't have the same feel. Like the convention itself is huge. Like at the Javits Center, it's even bigger than Comic-Con by like 20 or 30,000 people. But it's very hectic, but it's also very fun. And I can, again, I'm with all my friends and all the fans, all the Star Wars fans at New York Comic-Con. So that one's really fun. It's just when you leave New York Comic-Con, it's not, it's usually, it's in October, so it's usually dark and cold. It's not like sunny in the summer like San Diego, but I like being in Manhattan. I like being in New York City. It's fun. So those are probably my two favorite Comic Cons, but I do like 20 different shows a year usually. So there's other ones that are really fun, like Denver Pop Culture Con, Phoenix. God, there's so many. I even do lots of little ones like Indianapolis, and well, not little, but they're smaller than the really huge ones. So like Indianapolis and Cincinnati. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the country usually. Again, when there isn't like a major pandemic, global pandemic, kind of keeping us all settled in.
Right. We talked a little bit about your favorite characters to draw. Do you have a favorite planet or Star Wars vehicle or something to draw?
I don't know about a favorite planet. I mean, I've drawn, usually most of my illustrations I do tend to focus on the characters. Now I've done some Star Wars comics where I've had to like go to a few different alien planets and stuff like that. Or when I've done illustrations for Star Wars Insider, if I'm illustrating a story and I have to do multiple scenes on a certain planet, stuff like that. But usually I'm more concerned with the character. I mean, the alien environments or the cities are, they can always be fun to illustrate. Like I guess like Coruscant is always fun. Because I like I like the Blade Runner feel of Coruscant, and I like cyberpunk, I guess, like that. I like that aesthetic. But I would say I'm usually more excited about the characters. So if it's not like major characters like Vader or Fett or Han Solo or Luke Skywalker, you know, I mean, I like the bad guys a lot. Like I like drawing the Sith characters, but I also like drawing Jedi too. So bad guys can be more fun to illustrate because you can be a you can take some more liberties, I think, a little more dramatic liberties with bad guy characters. But
Is there a favorite Star Wars species you like to illustrate?
hmm man, favorite Star Wars species. I mean, Wookiees are fun. I like drawing. Some people don't like drawing fur, but like there's actually something kind of like therapeutic when I'm like drawing like organic looking, whether they're creatures or aliens or whether it's like actually like scenery like trees or planets. When I'm doing like organic textures, like if it's like a Wookiee and it's all that fur, there's something kind of therapeutic about that. I don't know, like I can turn my brain off and I can sketch and render and I don't have to overthink it. So it people are like, oh, you drew all that fur, that must be so much hard work, or that must be frustrating, or you had to draw all that hair, for like if you're drawing Padme. It's like, oh, you got to render all that hair and stuff. It's like, no, it doesn't bother me because that's actually when I'm not concerned about nailing a likeness necessarily, or I'm not concerned about getting every little detail on a blaster. I'm just kind of sketching fur and rendering fur, or I'm painting. If I'm painting fur or painting hair, like, yeah, I can just, that's when I get kind of zen. So I like those kind of characters.
Cool. Yeah, my overhead light kind of burned out here on me.
Oh, that's all right.
Let's see. Speaking of characters and all that, one of my favorites that you've done is Jaina Solo. You've done a lot of work with her. Now I found the one that I got last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one of the Good Hunting ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious, what references, if any, you use for like Jaina characters who aren't in movies, like Jaina or Tennelle down there in the corner, or Elena.
So I had gotten to work with Lucasfilm and Christy Golden on a few different Jaina Solo projects over the years. So I've actually gotten to illustrate her, oh gosh, I don't even know, maybe 4 or 5 different occasions for different things. The one that you were referencing there for Good Hunting was a short story in Star Wars Insider. So back in the day, a good friend of mine she's a cosplayer, and her name's Victoria, and she goes by the name Scruffy Rebel. So if you look up Scruffy Rebel, she has her own clothing line now called she does with her boyfriend, called Gold Bubble Clothing. But yeah, so that's Victoria, aka Scruffy Rebel, and her boyfriend Jinyo they run Gold Bubble Clothing, and which is a lot of leggings and like sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek inspired leggings. But Victoria used to cosplay as Jaina Solo, and she's a really great cosplayer. Like she does other characters too, not just Jaina, but she looked to me, and even a few of my other artist friends who have used her for their artwork, she kind of epitomized the look of the character like really well. So she became my impromptu model for Jaina. So I would work with her boyfriend, who's actually a really good friend of mine, Jinyo. We would set up a photo shoot if we were working together, if I happened to be in California at the time, or I would, email him or text him, whatever. Hey, I need some shots like this for a project. So then he would send me some photographs of her in costume in certain poses. And so I would kind of art direct him over the internet. But so yeah, I've used her as my model for Jaina Solo. I've also used her as my model for Princess Leia in some artwork as well, different Star Wars pieces. So yeah, so I got to work with them, and Tennelle Ka is actually another friend of mine who is a cosplayer. Her name is Monique, and she had actually built the costume as well for that character. I think it was Star Wars Celebration 5 or 6. It might have been 6. And she had taken some photos, and she was in the costume contest for Celebration that year in Orlando, and her costume just blew everyone away. It was amazing. So fast forward, I think a couple years later, and I got this project where I had to illustrate Jaina and Tennelle Ka, and I was like, oh, I'll just call up Monique because she already made the costume, and I could get some cool photos. So that's her in the artwork, and then I put her in some other illustrations for that. So it just so happened that basically some friends of mine were cosplayers that had these really cool costumes, and I was like, it really saved me a lot of time and a lot of work.
I'm sure it does. I mean, I looked at some of her references when I was building my own Jaina Solo to get into
Yeah.
Very inspiring.
So that's cool that you know who she is. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And you have also created a few characters along the way. I think Kai Justice was one that you created.
Yeah.
Semadu.
Yep.
They were based, I think, on some of your fellow artists. Talk about that in the creation. And I was also curious, like, when you're working with someone on like a short story, how much creative control do you have over like the creation of the characters? Are you just coming up with the look of the character, or do you come up with some of their personality too, like the outfit? What goes into that?
So it really depends. I mean, if I get a short story assignment to illustrate certain characters for a short story, if the author is very specific, like this is what the character looks like, this is what their costume looks like, then I that's my jumping off point. I try to nail what the author, and even Lucasfilm, they might have very specific ideas. It really just depends on the project. I'll get some projects where it's like, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, well, we just need a Jedi character, and we have a name, or we don't have a name. We just need a character to stand in for these scenes, So, and that's kind of how Kai Justice basically came about, and Ursema Du to an even, she's to even a lesser extent to that degree. But basically, when I was just starting out doing Star Wars art, early on in my career, I would say this would have been around the early 2000s, and I was illustrating Star Wars books for Wizards of the Coast. Now they ended up getting the Star Wars license after West End Games had lost it. So Wizards of the Coast, they do Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons. So they ended up getting the Star Wars role-playing game license, and they had hired me to do some illustrations, and I had to do a series of illustrations of just this Jedi character interacting with other characters and other aliens. And a good friend of mine, Justin Chung, who was also a Star Wars fan and a sketch card artist at the time, and he still does them, but he was building his own Jedi costume, and this was right after episode 1 had come out, and it was just before episode 2. So this was probably like 2001. And he had built his own custom Jedi robes, and just for himself. He wasn't really a cosplayer, but he was part of the Replica Prop Forums, which is the RPF, which is, they're still around, but this is in the early days of the internet. It was sort of the go-to source. This is where guys like Adam Savage came from, and Grant Imahara, who used to work for Lucasfilm. These guys would congregate online, and they would share their tips and their secrets and their techniques for building Star Wars props and costumes. And my friend Justin was a part of this forum of these costume builders and these replica prop builders. And again, this is before replica props were as big as they are now. I mean, they had them then, but this is before Gentle Giant and some of these other people that now they make these things all the time. But back then they weren't quite as always as attainable. So a lot of these people would make their own costumes, their own lightsabers. And basically my friend Justin had made his own Jedi costume and lightsaber. And I needed him I basically said, hey, I need to come up with a Jedi character for these illustrations. Can I take some photos of you in your Jedi robes with your lightsaber? Maybe I can paint you as this character and he's like, yeah, sure. So we did a photo shoot. I took like hundreds of photos and then ended up putting him in a bunch of different illustrations over the next year or two in different Star Wars projects. And the character just kept kind of popping up in different places, like different Star Wars game books and different Star Wars magazines, even in Star Wars Insider. So I would always kind of include him whenever I needed a Jedi character. And so some of my other artist friends who were also friends with Justin, they kind of caught on to it, and they would put him in their illustrations. So the character kind of took on a life of his own. And then my friend at Lucasfilm, Pablo Hidalgo, I was working with him on HoloNet News for Star Wars Insider, which was sort of this in-universe CNN type news feature that it gave reporting on the galaxy and during the Clone Wars and all this stuff. So we were wrapping up HoloNet News, and Pablo was like, hey, I want to put Kai. Well, I knew his name was Kai Justice. Pablo knew his name was Kai Justice, but it wasn't official. We hadn't really put it in print or anything. And he's like, hey, let's make Kai Justice official. We'll put him in HoloNet News. I'll put his name in the article and we'll say that he escaped Order 66. So I was like, oh, that's so awesome. He's like one of the few Jedi that gets away. So anyway, that's how Kai Justice sort of became over the next, like he kind of had a life of about 10 years before Disney came along and rebooted everything. But and Ursima Dew is actually she's a Star Wars artist, Jan Duursma. She used to draw the Star Wars comics for Dark Horse, and she was a really good friend of mine. She still is, but I haven't seen her in a little while. But she was really good friends with me and Justin, and I ended up creating a Jedi character based off of her, and she was Kai Justice's master, because for me and Justin, Jan was like our mentor. Like Jan taught me a lot as an artist, because she was a very accomplished artist. She's a little bit older than me, but she had been drawing the Star Wars comics for Dark Horse for like, when I met her, she had just started, but she had already been drawing comics for Marvel and DC, and I was a fan of her work. Anyway, she was a mentor to me and Justin, so I thought, oh, I'll turn her into a Jedi Master character for Justin's character. So that's how Ursima Dew came about, and it's just Jan Duursma's name as an anagram. So I ended up putting her in some artwork, and she ends up fighting General Grievous, but General Grievous ends up killing her in the story. I didn't write the story, but it's just the artwork I did for it. So, but yeah, that's kind of, when you're a Star Wars artist, you get to put your friends in your Star Wars art sometimes. And in this case, I put one of my best friends in my Star Wars art, and it kind of took on a life of its own. Like other artists were using him in other like comics, and Jan put Justin's character in the Dark Horse comics. My friend Chris put Justin's character in some other Star Wars source books. So it was just sort of a minor background Jedi character who's probably, he's mostly known for escaping Order 66, but he ends up getting caught by Darth Vader and getting killed later, which I got to illustrate that story. But
yeah, that must feel kind of surreal to see them take on a life of their own like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true of any, like, I'm just an artist, but any author that creates these characters for like comics or books, and like if you create a character and now he's in a TV show on Disney Plus and like they have their own series, that's, you know, I'm thinking like Falcon and Winter Soldier or something like that. It's sort of the same thing, but that's a much, much bigger scale than what I did. Like I just drew my friend as a Jedi character, and over the course of 10 years, he kind of, in the Star Wars mythology, he has a history and a background, but he doesn't have his own TV show or anything, unfortunately. But
well, another question I had, you talked about doing some of the short stories, illustrations and such. How is it different doing like a full page illustration for like a short story versus the process of comics, the collaborative process? Is that?
Oh yeah, it's much different. So like if I'm illustrating a comic book story, I'm often given what it looks like, kind of like a movie script. So there you get like pages of, you know, like every comic book page, there's a corresponding script page, and it's like it's like page 1, page 2, this happens, page 3, this happens, and it's so detailed. I mean, you're getting dialogue for the characters normally. You're getting descriptions of pretty much every panel. So it's written very similar to like a movie script when you're working on a comic book story. Now, if I'm doing like illustrations for like a short story, like for like Star Wars Insider or a book or something, it's usually just like a paragraph saying, okay, this is what we need. And now a lot of the time when I'm illustrating a short story, I'm getting the whole story most of the time, like the actual script, but it's written completely differently. It's like written, you know, like a book. So I'm reading the story just like anyone else is reading the story. But if I don't get specific descriptions from the publisher of what to draw, usually what would happen is they would give me a script or not, the actual short story. I'd read it and I'd be like, oh, this would make a good scene to illustrate. And I'd go through and I'd kind of highlight the different things that stood out to me that I'd want to draw. And normally for Star Wars Insider, they'd be like, well, we need normally they're like, we can only pay for like 2 illustrations, but if you want to do more, that's awesome. And I'd always do more. So I would end up doing like 3 or 4 or 5 illustrations sometimes. For they will only pay me for a couple, because I'm pretty sure that's still their budget. But so yeah, I would always overdo it, but I would pick out like certain scenes, and then I either call up the author or email the author, and we talk it out, like, well, what were you thinking here? Or, you know, so not every artist would do that. Not every artist would have the time to do that. But luckily for me, because I'd been working for Lucasfilm even at that point for a long while, and because I do so many Comic Cons, I'd already be friends with a lot of these authors most of the time. So I could just email them or call them up and be like, hey, what were you thinking here? And oftentimes I could just deliver illustrations that were pretty on target with what Lucasfilm and what the author would want. So, so those were fun times. I like drawing and illustrating the short stories for all the different Star Wars books. Now, mostly what I do now is a lot of posters, a lot of fine art, stuff like that. I don't work in fiction quite as much as I used to, but.
Do you have any current finished projects that are available for fans to enjoy, like your most recent completed work?
I mean, right now I'm working on Star Wars posters right now for Lucasfilm and Disney that are being pitched by the publishers, by the licensors. The most recent things that I've done that have come out, last summer I did a Star Wars poster that was inspired by Star Wars Rebels that had Ahsoka and Darth Vader in it, and that was really popular. And that did really well. That poster sold out, but I'm doing some new ones with the same publisher. And I'm doing sketch cards for Tops, and which are just fun, quick, well, not always quick, but they're fun sketch characters where I'm drawing Star Wars characters for Tops on those sketch cards. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm right now, I'm sort of in between having Star Wars stuff come out. I'm still talking with Disney with some stuff that's supposed to be coming out at some point. I did some Star Wars posters over a year ago. Yeah, so some stuff I do, and then like it's like, okay, this is going to come out at this point, but then the pandemic happened, and then everything got like shifted around. So I'm like, oh, so these posters may or may not come out now, but if they come out, they might come out later. I don't know. But I am doing some stuff that should be coming out hopefully this summer. So I just can't really talk about it. But
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to plug here? If fans would like to get in touch with you to find out where to buy some artwork, find out more about what you do and what you have done?
Sure. Yeah. Well, since I'm not, well, I will hopefully be doing some conventions later this year if they still happen. So fans might be able to see me once the world starts kind of going back to normal, hopefully. But for now, like, I mean, I have my website, which is joecorroney.com, and from there you can visit me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And then I also have my new Patreon. So if fans want to, because I'm not doing conventions and I haven't been able to do any for this last year, and that's kind of a great, another important source for my income to survive as a self-employed artist. So I started up a Patreon mainly because I haven't been doing conventions. So people can visit me there, and if they want to support me there, that would be awesome. I have lots of great incentives and lots of free artwork I give out for that. And I started up my Twitch and my YouTube channels, which I do occasionally. So you fans can follow me there. I'm usually doing like Star Wars sketches on my Twitch live stream. Usually, I mean, I do other characters, other comic book characters, and other movie characters, but yeah, just visit me at joecorroney.com, and I have my online art store. And if you visit my art store through my website, you'll be able to find it pretty easy. I sell all my original Star Wars art there too. So,
Awesome.
Oh, and I'm planning on doing my Star Wars Day sale on May the 4th. So that's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. So May the 4th be with you. So I usually do every year like a big Star Wars sale for my online art store. And I usually do like 30 or 35% off.
Though.
What's that?
I said, I think this interview might be coming out after.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
I'll still have, people can still visit my store anytime. I do sales like every few weeks, every month anyway. So.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, but I'm sure there are a lot of places to check out on May the 4th. And again, just for anyone watching, this gorgeous art from Joe.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun one to do. I like drawing those.
That was from Pittsburgh, Wizard World, a few years ago.
Yeah, that would have been in that's a little more than a few years ago. I think Pittsburgh Wizard World was probably like 2016, maybe 27.
Yeah,
it's around there.
I think shortly after Force Awakens came out. So
yeah, I want to say it was like 2016 or 2017. I remember being in Pittsburgh. Yeah, it was right around that time. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it was great talking with you here, Joe, today. And again, please, if you love Star Wars art, Joe is one of the best. Please go out and support him and support UNICEF by donating to RebelCon. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. May the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.